Hey everyone, Steve from Backcountry Gallery here, coming to you on location here in the Smoky Mountains. And this time around, I want to talk about finding subjects with big glass. A lot of times people are using 500, 600 millimeter, or even longer lenses, and I see them struggle to find the subject in their viewfinder. And you know what? I have a very simple technique that I use that makes that so easy. It's very, very simple. But first, you got to talk about the problem. And the problem is, most of the time, when people see a subject, they'll grab their lens and they'll kind of point it that direction, then they'll search for the subject using the lens and kind of try to telescope around, and you know, it doesn't work like that. What you need to do instead is locate the subject with your eye and then make the lens match, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that right now. Okay, to demonstrate this, I was fortunate enough here in the Smoky Mountains to capture a small little bear cub, and I put him up on a nearby stump here. As you can see, he's pretty tame, he's pretty easy to get along with, so he's not too lively though, but at least he's cute, right? Okay, so let me actually demonstrate this for you now. I have the bear cub up there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my head and my eye still. I'm going to fixate on him. I'm going to keep him in the center of my vision. And then with my dominant eye, I'm going to bring my dominant eye to the viewfinder. So if you notice, my head's going to stay still, my eye's going to stay still. Even as the top of the viewfinder kind of blocks my vision here a little bit, my eye does not move, my head does not move. I'm fixated on him the entire time, and he's right in the center of my viewfinder. The technique is really that simple. It's not hard at all. 10 minutes of practice and you'll be an expert. Again, the key is keeping your eye and your head perfectly still when you're dealing with a stationary subject like this, and then just bringing the camera up. I'm not moving my head, I'm not moving my eye, only my arms are moving, and I see him right there. If you don't see your subject, one tip is to go ahead and just move the camera around just a little bit of wiggle there, and a lot of times it'll pop into view. Maybe you were a little high or maybe you were a little low, but that's the basic technique. It's super simple. I have a couple other tips for you for using the technique with moving subjects and for tripods, but first I want to give you a couple little bonus tips here for when you're getting started. Now the first tip is to make sure that your focus distance is about the same as the distance to the subject. Once you get good at this, you won't need to do that anymore. You'll just pop the camera up to your eye, start focusing at the same time, and the subject will be right there because you have the technique down. But at first, it helps if you focus approximately the same distance as the subject. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and the reason that can help is that if the camera is like focused at minimum distance or something and the subject's way out there, it can be so blurry you can't even recognize the subject, so you don't know if you're doing it right or not. But again, that's kind of training wheels, so once you get the hang of it, you won't need that anymore. The second tip is for zoom lens shooters. If you're shooting a zoom lens, you can use this exact technique, except zoom all the way down to your minimum focal length on the lens. So if you have like a 70 to 300, for instance, zoom down to 70 millimeter and then bring it up and then zoom out to 300 millimeter. That way you have a wider field of view when you first start looking, and it's easier to catch the subject. Again, this is training wheel stuff though. In time you'll be able to do this with any focal length and not have to mess around with the zoom at all. And one last tip, I said two, but I'm going to give you a third as a bonus. If you happen to be using a mirrorless camera, super important, make sure the camera is active and the EVF is turned on. Otherwise you bring it up, you see a black viewfinder, and by the time you get it turned on, you've moved too much and you'll miss the subject. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Steve, that's great for a stationary subject, but what if I have a subject that's coming at the camera, coming across the camera? Well, for coming at the camera, it's actually the exact same thing. You fixate on your subject, you get that subject in the center of your vision, and you just bring the camera up as you're looking at it, and boom, it'll be right in the center of your viewfinder. So that part's easy. So what happens though when you have an animal that's running across a frame, right to left, left to right, whatever? That's going to be a lot more tricky, and that is going to take a little bit more practice, but we're going to basically apply the same principle to it. The way I do it is I'm going to go ahead and grab my camera, and as the animal's running across, I'm going to keep my eye fixated on the animal. I'm going to keep the animal in the center of my vision. I'm going to keep my head more or less still, and I'm going to just twist at the torso to track him. And that's going to allow me to stay right on the animal with my eye, and I'm going to be able to keep him in the center of my vision. So basically what I'm going to do, if I had an animal running across right now, obviously we're just demoing this, but if I did have one running across right now, what I would do is I'd find the animal, I'd get him in the center of my field of vision, and then as he was running, I would bring the camera up, again, ignoring the viewfinder. I'm going to keep my eye on him no matter what, and then I'm going to bring it up, and he's going to end up in the viewfinder. The key is not to get distracted when you get blocked. The trick is to keep tracking that animal, even though the viewfinder is temporarily, the housing here is temporarily blocking your vision. Don't let that throw you off. Just keep moving the way you were moving, and just imagine where that animal is or should be. You're kind of just tracking it with your mind now instead of visually for just that split second when that housing gets in the way. But if you do it that way, as the animal's running across, you just bring it up and you find that he's right in there. Now, the other thing with this is, again, it is trickier and it will take more practice, and there's degrees of difficulty. Obviously, if I have a swallow flying by at 10 feet, it's gonna be way harder to do than a great egret that's at, 30 or 40 yards just kind of drifting by. So there is, degrees of difficulty, and it does take practice. I recommend starting with slower moving subjects and then moving up to faster moving subjects. But again, it's the same principle as when we were doing stationary objects. It's just that we're gonna be doing a little bit of twist with our torso this time. Okay, the final trick I want to show you is doing this with a tripod. Now, the first thing I want to tell you though, before we get to the actual technique with the tripod, is in order for this to work real well for you, you gotta master that first technique with stationary subjects doing it handheld. You have to kind of develop that instinct. 2 minutes doing it handheld, it's gonna be very hard to go to the tripod and instantly be perfect at it. So really, really get that first technique handheld down, and then this comes much more naturally. But anyhow, here's how the technique works. It's, again, a modification of that first technique with the stationary subject. This time, once again, I have my little bear friend over here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab the tripod and the camera. It's all on my loose gimbal here, and I'm going to sight him just like I normally would. I'm fixating on him. I have him in the center of my vision, but this time I'm kind of moving down towards the camera as I'm watching him. So I'm kind of moving with my body down towards that, and I'm squatting with my knees a little bit here and basically bringing the camera and my eye into alignment. So I'm moving the tripod and the camera and the viewfinder towards my eye as I'm going in towards him, and everything's coming together, and boom, he's right there in the center of the frame, just like you want him. This does take more practice though, but it's definitely worth practicing and worthwhile doing. Speaking of practice, there's a couple other tips here I want to give you before we end the video today. The best way to do this, again, obviously, is lots of practice. You don't need a ton of it. I've seen people pick this up in like 2 minutes, but the more you practice with it, the easier it's going to be. Also, if you try it and you find you're not seeing that subject right in the viewfinder, especially at first when you're doing just stationary subjects handheld, there's a good chance that the reason it's not working for you is because either your eye's moving or your head is moving. Make sure both of those are solid and stationary. If you need to, get a partner to help watch you. It's very easy for you to think that you're being still when you're really not. As soon as that eye is still and as soon as your head is still and you're doing that stationary subject for the first time, it's going to pop into the middle of that viewfinder every time very consistently for you. And finally, if you enjoy tips and tricks like this, obviously there's more to getting great wildlife shots than just finding the subject in the viewfinder. I have a whole book, Secrets to Stunning Wildlife Photography, goes over tons of tips and tricks like this, and also make sure you check out my other two books, Secrets to the Nikon Autofocus System and Secrets to Exposure Metering for Nikon. All of them are jam-packed, tons of information. Also, make sure you sign up for my free email newsletter at my site. I also do like all sorts of blog posts. I do workshops. All of that information is sent to my email newsletter subscribers. It's a must-have. Finally, make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. Click that little bell so you're notified every time I post a new link. That's enough of me for the day. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.